Okay, so I went ahead and completed a first line in practice. I find this is really valuable for students because we don't do lettering a lot or even writing a lot by hand in school any longer, and it helps them to just slow down and be meticulous using their hands, their eyes, their brain all at the same time. And you know, it can be a hard sell sometimes. We're gonna do lettering. They feel like, what, are we in grade 1 again, or grade 2? But I always spin it in a positive way and discuss how it makes drawings look very professional if you have good lettering. You know, truth be told, when I took engineering graphics in first year at University of Toronto back in 1983, I got a mark off in every drawing because my lettering is messy. And it's got a bit better over years, but it's not great. And one thing I want everyone to keep in mind is, after doing any line of text, there's always going to be a space minimum, 1 line space between next lines of text. Anyway, so you get the idea. I'll point out that a few things. One, there's no little extra line on the G. It's just nice and clean at that curve. I's don't have little hats on top or bottom, neither do J's, and I and J's tend to be a little bit more narrow. The rest letters, we're aiming towards them being about as wide as they are tall. O is just O. R's the long, or the foot here, I don't know what you want to call it. It doesn't start at the corner, it starts out here on the curve. What else? U is just a U, there's no line down on the right. W, the center lines meet at the top. Z does not have a line in the middle, neither does 7. And 0 should be the same as an O. 2, there's a reverse curve here. It doesn't come down straight, it actually comes down. It makes a decided curve right there. 4s are not open on top, they meet at the top into a point. And 6s are basically 180 degrees rotated version of 9s. So this lettering, if I was to mark it, I'd give myself maybe a 7.5 out of 10 or 8. Not the prettiest lettering I've ever done. It's a little bit awkward because of this stand. I'm using it right in front of my face, holding my phone to do the recording. I'll mention a few more things right now. These are the best erasers used. They're vinyl. They don't leave black marks or remnants of the graphite on the papers as much as the pink ones do. Stadler's a very good brand name. When you make mistakes, it's nice to have this erasing shield. So let's say you went too far, you know, when you're making your A, this is nice because it can be used to cover up the parts you want to protect and then erase the parts you want to get rid of. And the erasing shield does that for you. The different shapes are just there for you to use any way you want. You don't have to use a certain shape for certain mistakes. And you can see now I've cleaned up the line to extend past. Hopefully that's clear on the video. Another thing I want to mention now is there's more than one way to make the guidelines. Lettering always is drawn inside of guidelines. The most common height I use with classes is 3mm high, which is about 1/8 of an inch. That's for almost everything, all of the dimensions on the drawing, any notes. And then I use 6mm lines quite often when doing the title block. So we actually do 3mm lines or guidelines more often than 6mm. So on this page, I pre-drew them in actually in AutoCAD. But if you had a blank page and when it comes time to do the lettering, the best way to do it is probably to use this Ames lettering guide. So the Ames lettering guide has a whole number of holes in it. I stick to the holes on this side here, which could also be that side, doesn't matter which way you do it. It tends to fit the pencil better this way though. Each of these holes is 1/8 of an inch apart, approximately 3mm. And so the method to use it would be to line it up where you want the lines to go, put the pencil into one of the holes, wherever you want to start, pull the pencil across in that hole, it'll draw a line. Once again, use a 4H pencil, so it's nice and light and thin. And then you can go back either in the next hole down or next hole up, and that will draw 2 lines parallel that are 1/8 of an inch apart or 3mm. And if you want to do 6mm lines, then you draw the pencil across on one hole and skip up to the second hole above or the second hole below, and that would be approximately 6mm guidelines. So remember, all lettering is done in guidelines, all uppercase with exception of millimeters. Another method to make guidelines would be to use a scale. This is a triangular scale. It's metric. It has a 1-to-1 scale, which is a millimeter ruler. And then if I flip around, there's a 1-to-10. So really it looks the same, except that's 100 millimeters, whereas normally that would be only 10 millimeters, 1-to-10 scale. There's 1-to-2, 1-to-20 scales. And this one has 1-to-5 and 1-to-50. There are other metric scales that have 1-to-125 and other scales like that. And I'll talk more about that later. So these are used so that if you have a drawing that has something very big drawn on it, and it's done to say a scale of 1-to-100, you could, or say 1-to-10, you could easily just put the scale on the page and measure directly without having to do the math conversion of multiplication in that case. So another way to do this would be to line this up on the page if there were no lines, and you can put a small mark at one of the graduations, move your pencil 3 or 6 graduation weight, make another small mark, and where those marks are drawn using a T-square, find the marks, do a line across, move to the next mark, do another line across. When doing line work, there's a technique to it, and so I'll just mention this now. In general, you use instruments that are clear whenever possible. Some T-squares you'll buy aren't clear like this, see-through. It's better if they are because there's less of a shadow. This one has a bit of a shadow, but it's less of a shadow, so you don't end up getting a parallax error where if the pencil's pointed at a different angle like this, you can see the lead ends up quite far away from the actual edge. So it's easier that you can see where you're lining up on marks that have been made after measurements have done, where you can find the mark exactly with the pencil, and then having the pencil slightly angled away from the drawing edge, in this case the T-square, it'll allow the lead to be right where you want it to be. So accuracy is important in drawings. And then when you pull it across, I rotate it as I go because that minimizes the wear in one spot, and you tend to get a better, more uniform line as far as its thickness goes. So the pencils, of course, will need sharpening regularly as you go along. And so that would be how to do a line using a 4H pencil for doing lettering. So that's called a lettering guideline. All right, and then after having students do something like this, you can find other assignment pages where they have the letters and they even have arrows shown on them as I put into the course online. And students can follow those to know how to train their hands to do the lettering, which line first. It shows you in essence when the pencil comes off the page to be placed at the new start point for a new line within that letter. So it's actually quite good. Something else I'll note, so those lettering exercises are good for students. When doing lettering, like I said, line up with the T-square on the drawing page. It's important to get used to preparing drawings that are up and down, not on an angle like many people when writing will want to do for comfort. So that's also part of this. If I do some more lettering, it will get better in time. This is the first lettering I've done in over a year. It's like hammering a nail the first few times you do it. After you haven't used a hammer for a while, you're going to miss or take a little longer to nail it than the 10th nail or the 100th nail, in which case you probably drive most nails in 2 or 3 hits. All right, so I would also put lettering guidelines into the title block. Let me just move my camera a little bit. Oops. Okay. So in this case, I provide a title block for students, and I would put guidelines in. So say for the title itself, and this one I do 6. Everything else will be 3 millimeters high. So there's my guidelines. Should be hard for you to see. And I put the title in, whatever I asked the students for it to be. So in this case, lettering. Ooh, terrible letters, but like I said, you get better the more you do, of course. Oops. Don't like my R very much, so I'd probably come back and clean that one up. Okay, so that just gives you a quick example. Not the prettiest lettering I ever did, but that's okay. And so that's it for lettering for now. Remember, I'll just recap 3 pencils I like to use with students. H for doing the actual drawings when you're describing the object itself. And then 2H for lines that need to be a little more crisper, cleaner, slightly thinner for doing lettering, hidden lines, center lines, and also dimensions and extension lines, which we'll get into later. And then 4H for doing the lettering guidelines, and later also I use them with students to do construction lines when you're finding the location of features, shapes on the drawing page. They're drawn in 4H, and then later drafts person comes back and redraws them dark and thick using H or 2H pencils, depending what kind of line it is. And then the Ames lettering guide, the holes on this side are all approximately 1/8 of an inch apart, or 3 millimeters, so I like to use those. They will always go on T-squares to make sure lines are drawn horizontal and parallel to each other. The Ames lettering guide, or sorry, that's the Ames lettering guide. The erasing shield, which allows you to cover up the stuff you like and erase the stuff you don't want, mistakes. So that's great for cleaning up drawings as well as cleaning up lettering. And then the vinyl eraser, and of course the two most important parts here for most drawings, the base of everything, would be the drawing board itself. And in this case, I just bought one with self-healing mats because occasionally you're going to be using a compass and the point goes in, so it protects my desk surface. And so it's just an option. You can buy vinyl, use it green or white to go on top of a piece of plywood or a desktop as well. And then the T-square. T-squares are for drawing horizontal lines that are parallel with each other. There's a head and a blade. I always remind students that even though this is called a blade, it's not used as a sword. If they do and they start playing sword fight with each other, nicks appear on the edges and it damages them, so that you then have lines that may not be perfectly straight. They may have little dips here and there where there's chips out of the blade. And also mentioned that most drawing instruments we're going to use, the preference is instruments that are clear, see-through, so light can pass through them, so it's easier to see when you line up the pencil to the mark on the page. All right, so that's it for now. You guys can give it a practice.